I took a one-night bartending gig that paid more than I made in a month. All I had to do was serve drinks at a private celebration in a remote mansion deep in the Louisiana bayou. The ad on Craigslist was vague, just a date, a time, and a promise of cash payment at the end of the night. No questions asked. No experience with fancy cocktails required. Just show up, pour drinks, and leave before sunrise. The guests were strange, dressed in old-fashioned clothes that looked like they belonged in a museum. The requests were even stranger. Cocktails I had never heard of, drinks that should not exist. But the money was too good to question, and I needed it desperately. By the time the clock struck 3 a.m. and I finally left that cursed mansion, I understood why the ad kept getting reposted every week. I also understood why no bartender had ever returned for a second shift. My name is Clifford, and I am 32 years old. 2 months ago, I was living what I thought was a normal life in New Orleans, working double shifts at a downtown hotel bar, barely scraping by, drowning in debt from medical bills after my father passed away. The funeral costs alone had wiped out my savings. Then my landlord raised the rent, my car broke down, and my credit cards maxed out. I was 2 weeks away from eviction when I found that ad. It was late on a Tuesday night, and I was scrolling through Craigslist job postings in that desperate, hollow way you do when you are running out of options. Most of the listings were scams or paid so little they were not worth the gas money. But then I saw it, posted just 17 minutes earlier. Private event bartender needed, one night only, Saturday, October 14th, 7 p.m. to 3 a.m., $3,000 cash. Payment upon completion, no experience with craft cocktails. Required, must follow instructions exactly, serious inquiries only. $3,000 for 8 hours of work. That was more than I made in an entire month at the hotel. It had to be a scam. Nobody paid that kind of money for a single night of bartending, unless something was very wrong. But I was desperate, and desperate people do stupid things. I clicked on the listing and found a phone number. No company name, no address, just a local number and instructions to call between 11 p.m. and midnight for screening. I checked the time. It was 11:47 p.m. I had 13 minutes. I called. The phone rang 3 times, then connected. But instead of a person, I heard an automated voice. It was old-fashioned, with the crackling quality of a recording from decades ago. "Thank you for your interest in the position," the voice said. It sounded like a woman speaking in a thick Southern accent. "If you are calling about the bartending position for October 14th, please confirm your full name, age, and bartending experience after the tone." There was a beep. Clifford Morrison, 32 years old. I have been bartending for 8 years, mostly hotel bars and private events. Another pause. Then the voice continued. "Your qualifications are acceptable. The position requires absolute adherence to specific rules. Failure to follow these rules will result in immediate termination without payment. If you agree to these terms, you will receive GPS coordinates via text message within 5 minutes. Arrive at the location no earlier than 6:45 p.m. and no later than 7 p.m. on October 14th. Bring no electronic devices except your phone for navigation. Bring no cameras. Tell no one where you are going. Payment of $3,000 in cash will be provided upon successful completion of your shift at 3 a.m. Do you accept these terms?" I hesitated. Everything about this was wrong. The automated voice, the vague instructions, the absurd amount of money, the weird rules about not telling anyone, but $3,000 would pay my rent, my car repair, and leave me enough to buy groceries and maybe sleep without panic attacks for the first time in months. "Yes," I said, "I accept. Your acceptance has been recorded. GPS coordinates will be sent shortly. Do not be late." The line went dead. I sat there in my apartment staring at my phone, wondering what I had just agreed to. 5 minutes later, a text message arrived from an unknown number. It contained only GPS coordinates and a single sentence. "Follow the coordinates exactly. Do not deviate from the route." I plugged the coordinates into my phone's map. The location was deep in the bayou, about 90 miles southwest of New Orleans. The route took me through increasingly rural roads until it ended at what appeared to be the middle of nowhere. I had 4 days to talk myself out of it. 4 days to realize this was probably dangerous, possibly illegal, and definitely weird. But I did not talk myself out of it, because I needed that money, because I had run out of options. Because sometimes desperation is stronger than common sense. Saturday, October 14th arrived too quickly. I woke up that morning with a knot of anxiety in my stomach that would not go away. I tried to tell myself this was just a wealthy eccentric throwing a private party in an unusual location. Rich people did weird things all the time. Maybe they valued their privacy. Maybe they just liked the drama of secrecy, but I could not shake the feeling that I was making a terrible mistake. Still, I got ready. I dressed in my bartending uniform, black pants, white dress shirt, black vest, bow tie. I looked professional. I looked like someone who belonged behind a bar. I packed a small bag with a change of clothes and a flashlight just in case. At 4:30 p.m., I got in my car and started driving. The first hour was normal enough. I took the highway out of New Orleans, heading southwest through the flat Louisiana landscape. The sun was still up, casting long golden shadows across the fields and swamps. It was beautiful in that eerie way the bayou always is. Ancient cypress trees draped with Spanish moss, still water reflecting the sky. The sense that you are driving through a place that exists outside of time. But as I followed the GPS coordinates deeper into the wilderness, the roads became narrower. The pavement gave way to gravel, then to dirt. Cell phone signal disappeared completely. The trees grew thicker, blocking out the sunlight. I passed abandoned houses, rusted cars, old boats slowly sinking into the mud. I did not see another vehicle for the last 30 miles. At 6:52 p.m., just as the sun was setting, the GPS announced I had arrived at my destination. I stopped the car and looked around. I was on a narrow dirt road surrounded by swamp. Ahead of me, barely visible through the trees, I could see a structure. I drove forward slowly and the mansion came into view. It was massive, a 3-story antebellum plantation house with tall white columns and a wide veranda. But it was clearly old and neglected. The paint was peeling, revealing rotted wood underneath. Several windows were broken. The gardens were overgrown with weeds and wild vines. Spanish moss hung from everything like funeral shroud. But despite its decay, there was something magnificent about it. You could see what it must have been once, a grand estate, a symbol of wealth and power. Now it looked like something out of a Gothic novel, beautiful and terrible at the same time. As I pulled up to the front of the house, I noticed several other cars parked in the circular driveway. All of them vintage models from different eras. A 1920s Rolls-Royce, a 1940s Cadillac, a 1960s Lincoln Continental, all of them immaculate, polished to a shine, completely out of place in this decaying setting. I parked my beat-up Honda next to them and felt embarrassed. I checked the time on my phone. 6:58 p.m., perfect timing. I got out of the car and immediately felt the oppressive humidity of the bayou settle over me like a wet blanket. The air smelled of mud and rotting vegetation and something else. I could not quite identify. Something sweet and sickly, like flowers left too long in a vase. The front door of the mansion was open. I walked up the crumbling steps to the veranda and stood in the doorway, peering inside. The interior was dim, lit by candles and oil lamps. I could see a grand entrance hall with a sweeping staircase, faded wallpaper, and antique furniture covered in dust. "Hello?" I called out. My voice echoed through the empty house. For a moment, there was no response. Then I heard footsteps approaching from somewhere deep inside the mansion. A man emerged from the shadows. He was elderly, probably in his 70s, with white hair and a neatly trimmed beard. He wore an old-fashioned suit, black with a high collar and a silk cravat, that looked like it belonged in a museum. His face was lined with age, but his eyes were sharp and alert. "You must be Clifford," he said. His voice was deep and cultured, with a thick southern drawl that sounded like it came from another century. "Right on time. I appreciate punctuality." "Yes, sir," I said. "I am here for the bartending position." "Indeed you are," he replied. "My name is Beauregard Ashmore. This is my home. Tonight we are hosting a private celebration, and you will be serving drinks to our guests. Follow me." He turned and walked deeper into the house without waiting for a response. I followed, my footsteps echoing on the worn wooden floors. He led me through a maze of hallways and rooms, all of them filled with antique furniture and old paintings. Everything was covered in a thin layer of dust, as if the house had been abandoned for years, but someone occasionally came back to light the candles. Finally, we arrived at what must have been the ballroom. It was a large space with high ceilings, tall windows, and a massive chandelier hanging overhead. The chandelier was lit with real candles, casting flickering shadows across the walls. At one end of the room was a grand piano. At the other end was a fully stocked bar. "This is where you will work," Beauregard said, gesturing to the bar. Everything you need is here. The bottles are all labeled. The glasses are clean. Your job is simple. Serve drinks to our guests as they request them. Nothing more, nothing less. I walked over to the bar and examined the setup. It was impressive. The bar itself was made of dark mahogany, intricately carved with vine patterns. Behind it were shelves lined with bottles, dozens of them, maybe hundreds. Some of the labels I recognized. Others looked old and unfamiliar, written in elaborate script that was hard to read in the dim light. The glassware was crystal, delicate, and expensive. Everything was arranged perfectly, as if someone had spent hours preparing for this event. "This is quite a setup," I said. "We take our celebration seriously," Beauregard replied. "Now, before the guests arrive, you must understand the rules. These rules are not suggestions. They are absolute requirements. Break them, and you will be asked to leave immediately without payment. Do you understand?" "Yes, sir," I said, though unease was beginning to creep up my spine. Beauregard reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a piece of yellowed paper. He unfolded it carefully and placed it on the bar in front of me. The paper was old, the edges torn and discolored. The text was handwritten in elegant cursive script. It read, "Rules for the bartender. Rule 1, never refuse a drink request, no matter how strange the order sounds. If you do not know how to make it, improvise. Rule 2, do not look at the guest's feet. Keep your eyes above the waist at all times. Rule 3, do not clean any spilled drinks on the floor. Leave them until morning. Rule 4, keep serving until the clock strikes 3 a.m. Do not leave the bar before that time, no matter what you hear or see." I read the rules 3 times, trying to make sense of them. "These are unusual rules," I said carefully. "They are necessary," Beauregard said firmly. "This house has its own customs, its own requirements. You agreed to follow instructions exactly. Will that be a problem?" I looked at the paper again. The rules were strange, but they did not seem impossible to follow. Do not refuse drink orders. Fine, I could improvise. Do not look at feet. Weird, but manageable. Do not clean spills. Lazy, but okay. Work until 3 a.m., standard for night events. "No, sir," I said. "No problem." "Good." Beauregard picked up the paper and tucked it back into his pocket. "The guests will begin arriving shortly. Serve them well, and you will be paid handsomely at 3 a.m. Serve them poorly and you will leave with nothing. Are we clear?" "Yes, sir." "Excellent." He turned to leave, then paused. "One more thing, Clifford. The guests tonight are particular. They value tradition. They value respect. Treat them as you would treat honored guests from another time. Do you understand?" "I understand." "Then I will leave you to your work. Good luck." He walked away, his footsteps fading into the darkness of the hallway. I stood alone behind the bar, surrounded by hundreds of bottles of expensive liquor, in a decaying mansion in the middle of the Louisiana Bayou, about to serve drinks to guests I had not yet met, following rules that made no sense. For the first time since taking this job, I seriously considered walking out. But then I thought about my eviction notice, my maxed out credit cards, my empty refrigerator. $3,000, 8 hours of work. I could do this. I had to do this. I took a deep breath and started familiarizing myself with the bar setup. I checked the bottles, memorized where everything was located, tested the ice bucket, arranged the glasses. Everything was in perfect order, as if someone had been maintaining this bar for years despite the decay all around it. At exactly 7:15 p.m., I heard the first sounds of arrival. Voices in the entrance hall, footsteps on the wooden floors, low conversation and occasional laughter. The guests were arriving. The first guest to enter the ballroom was a woman in her 40s, wearing an elaborate gown that looked like it came straight from the 1800s. The dress was made of deep blue silk with layers of lace and intricate beadwork. Her hair was styled in an ornate updo, and she wore long white gloves that reached past her elbows. She glided across the room toward the bar with perfect posture, her dress rustling with each step. As she approached, I noticed her face was pale. Not just pale, but unnaturally white like porcelain. Her lips were dark red, almost purple. "Good evening," she said, her voice soft and formal. "I would like a Sazerac, if you please." "Of course," I said, grateful that she had ordered something I actually knew how to make. "Coming right up." I prepared the drink quickly, Rye whiskey, absinthe rinse, Peychaud's bitters, sugar cube, lemon peel. It was a classic New Orleans cocktail, and I had made hundreds of them during my years bartending in the city. I placed the drink on the bar in front of her. She picked it up with her gloved hand, brought it to her lips, and paused. She did not actually drink. She just held the glass there for a moment, closed her eyes, and inhaled deeply as if she were smelling the drink rather than tasting it. "Perfect," she said, though she had not taken a sip. "Thank you." She turned and walked away, still holding the full glass. That was odd, but maybe she just wanted to savor it slowly. More guests began arriving. They came in small groups, all of them dressed in formal clothing from different historical eras. Some wore styles from the early 1800s, high-collared coats, elaborate dresses with hoop skirts. Others were dressed in fashions from the 1920s, 1940s, 1960s, but none of them wore anything modern. And all of them were pale, unnaturally pale. Within 30 minutes, the ballroom was filled with maybe 50 people. They stood in clusters, talking in low voices, occasionally laughing. The piano had started playing on its own, a slow, melancholy waltz. Some of the guests began to dance, moving with eerie grace across the dusty floor. The scene was beautiful in a strange, otherworldly way, like stepping into a period film or a historical reenactment, but there was something deeply wrong about it that I could not quite articulate. The drink orders started coming quickly. A corpse reviver number 2, a rattlesnake. I remember the main, A between the sheets. Most of the orders were for cocktails I had never heard of. I did my best to improvise, mixing ingredients based on what sounded right, following Rule 1. Never refuse a drink request. And like the first woman, none of the guests actually drank. They would take the glass, hold it, smell it, sometimes bring it to their lips, but I never saw anyone actually swallow. The drinks just stayed in their hands, full and untouched. Around 8:30 p.m., a man in a Confederate officer's uniform approached the bar. He was tall and thin, with a long mustache and cold gray eyes. "Brandy Alexander," he said. His voice had a strange quality to it, like an old recording played through a scratchy speaker. I made the drink, cognac, creme de cacao, heavy cream, nutmeg garnish, and slid it across the bar. As I did, his hand reached out to take the glass and our fingers touched briefly. His skin was ice cold, not just cold but freezing, like touching a corpse that had been stored in a morgue. I pulled my hand back instinctively and he noticed. He smiled, showing teeth that were too white, too perfect. "Is something wrong?" he asked. "No, sir," I said quickly. "Just a long day, sorry." He took the glass and stared at me for a long moment before walking away. My heart was pounding. Something was very, very wrong here. I glanced at the clock on the wall. It was an old grandfather clock with a brass pendulum. The time read 8:37 p.m. I had more than 6 hours left. More guests approached for drinks. I kept serving, kept mixing, kept improvising cocktails based on names I had never heard. A widow's kiss, a death in the afternoon, a last word, a final word. The names were ominous, but I followed Rule 1 and made every drink requested. Around 9 p.m., I noticed the floor behind the bar was getting wet. Drinks had been spilling, not dramatically, just small amounts here and there. Guests would set glasses down carelessly. Liquid would slosh over the edges. Puddles would form. My instinct was to grab a towel and clean it up. But then I remembered Rule 3. Do not clean any spilled drinks on the floor. Leave them until morning. It went against every bartending instinct I had. You always kept your workspace clean, always. Spills were hazards. Spills attracted insects. Spills made everything sticky and disgusting. But the rule was clear, so I left the puddles alone and kept serving. By 10 p.m., there was a small lake of spilled alcohol spreading across the floor behind the bar. It was mostly clear liquids, vodka, gin, rum, mixed with darker spirits. The smell was overwhelming, sharp and chemical. I tried not to think about it and focused on the guests. That is when I made my first mistake. A young woman approached the bar. She could not have been more than 20, wearing a white dress that looked like a wedding gown from the Victorian era. Her blonde hair was arranged in ringlets and she wore a veil that covered most of her face. "Champagne cocktail," she said softly. I prepared it. Sugar cubes soaked in Angostura bitters, champagne, lemon twist. As I handed it to her, I caught a glimpse of something odd. The hem of her dress was moving strangely, as if something underneath it was not quite right. Without thinking, I looked down. Rule 2 flashed through my mind. Do not look at the guest's feet, but it was too late. I had already seen. Where her feet should have been, there was something else. Something dark and wrong. Not human feet. Not human at all. They looked like hooves, black goat hooves. I jerked my eyes back up immediately, my heart hammering in my chest. The young woman was staring at me. Through her veil, I could see her eyes, dark and hollow like empty sockets. "You looked," she whispered. "I am sorry," I said quickly. "I did not mean to. It was an accident." She continued staring at me for what felt like an eternity. Then slowly she picked up her champagne glass and walked away without another word. I stood there shaking, gripping the edge of the bar to steady myself. Goat hooves. She had goat hooves instead of feet. I forced myself to take a deep breath. Maybe I had imagined it. Maybe the dim lighting and my exhausted brain were playing tricks on me. Maybe. No. I knew what I had seen. And now that I knew to look for it, I could not unsee it. The way the guests moved was wrong. The way their clothes hung was wrong. They were not walking like normal people. They were moving carefully, deliberately, as if trying to hide something beneath their long dresses and coats. I wanted to run. I wanted to leave immediately. But Rule 4 was clear. Keep serving until the clock strikes 3 a.m. Do not leave the bar before that time, no matter what you hear or see. And besides, Beauregard had been very clear. Leave early and I would get nothing. No payment, no $3,000. Just debt and eviction and failure. I had to stay. I had to finish this. I kept serving drinks, keeping my eyes carefully above the waist, trying not to think about what I had seen. By 11 p.m., the celebration was in full swing. The piano music had grown louder and faster, and more guests were dancing. The ballroom was filled with the rustle of fabric, the murmur of conversation, and occasional bursts of laughter that sounded hollow and wrong. The drink orders became increasingly bizarre. A blood and sand, a suffering bastard, a zombie, a Satan's whiskers. I mixed each one mechanically, following recipes I half remembered or completely invented, using whatever bottles seemed appropriate. The guests never complained. They never sent drinks back. They just took them, held them, and continued their strange celebration. Around 11:30 p.m., an older gentleman approached the bar. He wore a formal suit from the 1920s, a three-piece with a pocket watch chain. His face was deeply lined and his white hair was slicked back with pomade. "Young man," he said, his voice raspy and tired. "I would like a hurricane if you know how to make one." "Yes, sir," I said. I did know that one. It was another New Orleans classic. Rum, passion fruit syrup, lime juice. As I prepared it, he leaned against the bar and studied me with watery gray eyes. "You are from New Orleans, are you not?" he asked. "Yes, sir." "Born and raised." "A beautiful city," he said wistfully. "I used to visit often many years ago. The French Quarter, the riverfront, the music. It was magnificent." "It still is," I said, handing him his drink. "Is it?" He took the glass but did not lift it. "I have not been back in a very long time. Perhaps I should visit again." "You should," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "It has changed a lot, but it is still beautiful." He smiled sadly. "Change is inevitable, I suppose. Everything changes. Everything ends. Even celebrations like this." He walked away, and I felt a chill run down my spine. There was something profoundly melancholy about him, about all of them. Like they were trapped in a memory they could not escape. The puddles of spilled alcohol behind the bar had grown larger. The entire floor was now covered in a thin layer of liquid that squelched under my shoes whenever I moved. The smell was nauseating, a mix of alcohol, decay, and that sickly sweet flower smell I had noticed when I first arrived. I checked the clock. 11:47 p.m., still more than 3 hours to go. A middle-aged woman in an emerald green gown approached next. She was wearing an elaborate necklace made of what looked like real emeralds and diamonds. Her makeup was heavy, almost theatrical. "Gin Ricky," she said. I made the drink, gin, lime juice, soda water, and handed it to her. She took it and smiled at me. Her teeth were stained and crooked, completely at odds with her elegant appearance. "You are doing wonderfully," she said. "We so rarely have bartenders who follow the rules properly." "Thank you," I said cautiously. "Most of them break Rule 2 within the first hour," she continued. "They look where they should not look, and then they become upset. It ruins the entire evening." "I try to respect the rules," I said. "Good, very good. She leaned closer, and I caught a whiff of her breath. It smelled like earth and rot. "You want your payment, do you not? $3,000 in cash?" "Yes, ma'am." "Then keep following the rules. Just a few more hours. We will be gone by 3 a.m. and you will have your money. Simple, easy." She smiled wider, showing more of those ruined teeth. "Unless, of course, you decide to leave early. But I do not think you will. You need the money too badly." She walked away, her dress rustling across the wet floor. My hands were shaking as I poured the next drink. How did she know about the money? Had Beauregard told them about me? Or could they somehow sense my desperation? Around midnight, the atmosphere in the room changed. The music grew slower, more somber. The dancing slowed. The conversations became quieter. And the guests started staring at me. Not overtly, not obviously, but I could feel their eyes on me whenever I looked up. Watching, evaluating, waiting for me to make a mistake. I kept my head down and focused on the drinks. A young man approached the bar. He could not have been more than 18, wearing a military uniform from World War I. His face was youthful but scarred, as if he had been burned. "Water," he said quietly. "Just water, please." I poured him a glass of water and slid it across the bar. He picked it up and stared at it for a long moment. "Do you know where you are?" he asked without looking at me. "A private party," I said carefully. "In a mansion in the bayou." "Do you know when you are?" he asked. That was a strange question. "It is October 14th, 2023. He finally looked at me. His eyes were filled with infinite sadness. "For you, perhaps," he said. "But for us it is always 1889. Always September 9th, always the night of the fire. Always the night we died." My blood turned to ice. "What?" I whispered. But he just picked up his water glass and walked away, disappearing into the crowd of guests. I stood there frozen, his words echoing in my mind. Always the night we died. No, that could not be real. This was not real. These were not ghosts. Ghosts did not exist. This was some kind of elaborate prank, some kind of performance art, some kind of... A glass shattered somewhere in the room. The piano music stopped abruptly. Every head turned toward the source of the sound. One of the guests, a woman in a red dress, had dropped her glass. It lay in pieces on the floor, the liquid spreading outward in a dark stain. She looked terrified. "I am sorry," she said. "I am so sorry, I did not mean to." Beauregard appeared from the shadows. I had not seen him enter the room, but suddenly he was there, standing over the woman. "You broke a glass," he said coldly. "It was an accident," she pleaded. "Please, I did not mean..." "The rules are very clear," Beauregard interrupted. "Broken items must be paid for." "I have been here so long," the woman whispered. "Please, I just want to leave. I just want to rest." "Then you should not have broken the glass." Beauregard reached out and touched her forehead with one finger. The woman gasped. Her body went rigid. Then slowly she began to fade. Not disappear, fade. Like she was becoming transparent, less solid, less real. Within seconds, she was gone completely. The only evidence she had ever been there was the broken glass on the floor. The room was silent. Every guest stood frozen, watching where the woman had been. Then, as if nothing had happened, the piano started playing again. The guests resumed their conversations. The dancing continued, and I stood behind the bar, barely able to breathe, finally understanding the horrible truth. These were not people. These were not performers. These were ghosts, spirits, the dead. And I was trapped here until 3 a.m., serving drinks to the deceased in a cursed mansion in the middle of nowhere. If you are watching this and thinking I should have run right then and there, you are probably right. But fear has a strange effect on people. Sometimes it paralyzes you. Sometimes it makes you cling to the rules even harder, because the rules are the only thing that makes sense in a senseless situation. So I stayed. I kept serving. I kept following the rules. Because what else could I do? And hey, if you are enjoying this story, please hit that like button and subscribe. Share this with anyone who has ever taken a job without asking enough questions. Leave a comment below. Would you have stayed for the money or would you have run? I genuinely want to know. But let me tell you what happened next, because it got so much worse. By 12:30 a.m. I had served over 200 drinks. The bar was in chaos. Empty glasses covered every surface. The floor behind me was completely submerged in spilled alcohol, at least 2 inches deep in some places. My shoes were soaked through, squelching with every step. The smell was overwhelming. a toxic mixture of hundreds of different spirits that made my eyes water and my head spin, but I could not clean it. Rule 3 was absolute: leave the spills until morning. The guests continued their celebration as if nothing was wrong, as if a woman had not just vanished into nothingness 20 minutes ago. They danced. They laughed. They requested drinks with names that sounded like epitaphs: a funeral coach, a dead reckoning, a final rest, a grave digger. I made each one without question, my hands moving automatically while my mind raced. They were dead. All of them. Ghosts trapped in this mansion, reliving some terrible event from 1889. The young soldier had said it clearly: always September 9th, always the night of the fire, always the night we died. But if they died in 1889, how are they here now in 2023? How is this possible? And more importantly, what happened to bartenders who broke the rules? I thought about the woman who had faded away. Beauregard had said she broke the glass, that broken items must be paid for. Was that what happened to previous bartenders? Did they break the rules and then become trapped here? Just another ghost at the endless celebration? The thought made my stomach turn. A man approached the bar. He was older, perhaps 60, wearing a formal tailcoat and white gloves. His face was distinguished with a neat gray beard and intelligent eyes. "Brandy," he said simply. "Neat." I poured the brandy into a crystal snifter and handed it to him. He took it but did not move away from the bar. Instead, he studied me carefully. "You are afraid," he observed. "No, sir," I lied. "Do not insult my intelligence, young man. I can see it in your eyes. You have realized what we are." I said nothing. What could I say? He swirled the brandy in his glass, watching the liquid coat the sides. "We were guests here once. Real guests, alive. It was a grand celebration, a wedding. My daughter's wedding." His voice grew distant. "The house was beautiful then, new, magnificent. We danced, we drank. We celebrated love and life and all the foolish things the living celebrate." "What happened?" I asked quietly. "Fire," he said simply. "It started in the kitchen, spread too quickly. The house was made of wood and filled with candles and oil lamps. By the time we realized what was happening, the exits were blocked. We tried to escape. We ran, we screamed. We died." He looked at me with those intelligent, terrible eyes. 134 years ago, and we have been here ever since, trapped in this moment, reliving it. Every Saturday night, every October 14th, the date our celebration became our tomb. "I am sorry," I whispered. "Do not be sorry for us," he said. "Be sorry for yourself. Because you are here now, and if you are not careful, you will join us. This house does not like to let people go." He walked away, leaving his full glass of brandy on the bar. I checked the clock. 12:51 a.m. Still more than 2 hours left. It felt like an eternity. More guests approached for drinks. I served them mechanically, no longer caring what I mixed or how it tasted. They would not drink it anyway. They never drank. They just held the glasses like props in a play that would never end. Around 1:15 a.m. something changed. The temperature in the room dropped suddenly. My breath came out in visible puffs. Frost began forming on the bottles behind the bar, on the crystal glasses, on the bar itself. The piano music became discordant, the melody breaking into harsh, jangling notes. The guests stopped dancing. They stood completely still, all of them facing the entrance to the ballroom. Beauregard entered, but he looked different now. Older, more transparent. His suit was torn and burned, and I could see patches of charred skin beneath the fabric. When he spoke, his voice echoed as if coming from far away. "Ladies and gentlemen," he announced, "it is time for the toast." A murmur ran through the crowd. Some of the guests looked excited. Others looked terrified. Beauregard walked to the center of the room and raised his hand. Immediately, every guest lifted their glass, whether full or empty, in unison. "To the celebration that never ends," Beauregard said. "To the family we have become. To the house that holds us. May we dance forever in the flames of memory." "To the flames," the guests echoed in unison. Their voices overlapped, creating an eerie chorus that raised the hair on the back of my neck. Then as one, they all brought their glasses to their lips, and for the first time that night they drank. It was horrible to watch. Their mouths opened too wide. Their throats worked wrong, like they had forgotten how to swallow. Some of them choked. Some of them coughed. Dark liquid. Not the drinks I had made, but something else, something thick and black, dribbled down their chins. When they finished, they lowered their glasses and stood in silence. Then slowly they all turned to look at me, every single one of them, 50 pairs of dead eyes staring at the living bartender behind the bar. Beauregard smiled. "Now," he said, "we offer a drink to our honored guest." He began walking toward the bar. The other guests parted to let him through, creating a path directly to where I stood. My heart was hammering so hard I thought it might break through my ribs. Every instinct screamed at me to run, but I remembered the rules. Rule 4, keep serving until the clock strikes 3 a.m. Do not leave the bar before that time, no matter what you hear or see. I had to stay. I had to finish this. Beauregard reached the bar and pulled out a bottle from beneath it, one I had not noticed before. It was old, covered in dust with a handwritten label that read 1889. "This," he said, "is a very special vintage, aged for 134 years. Only the most honored guests are offered a taste." He pulled out a crystal glass and poured a measure of dark red liquid. It looked like wine, but it moved wrong. Too thick, too viscous. He slid the glass across the bar toward me. "Drink," he said. I stared at the glass. The liquid inside seemed to pulse and writhe like something alive. "I appreciate the offer," I said carefully, "but I am working. I should not drink while on duty." "I insist," Beauregard said. His voice had taken on a hard edge. "You have served us so well tonight. You have followed the rules so carefully. You deserve to celebrate with us." "Rule 1, I said desperately. "Never refuse a drink request. That is what guests request from me, not what I drink myself." Beauregard's smile faded. The temperature dropped further. Ice crystals formed on the glass he had poured. "Do not be difficult, Clifford. You are our guest now, our honored guest, and guests participate in the celebration." "I am the bartender," I said firmly. "Not a guest. There is a difference." "Is there?" Beauregard leaned forward. This close I could see that his eyes were not eyes at all, just empty sockets with something dark and cold moving inside them. "You are in our house. You have served our drinks. You have seen our truth. That makes you part of us, part of the celebration that never ends." "I agreed to work until 3 a.m., I said. "Not to join you. My contract was clear." For a long moment, Beauregard just stared at me. The entire ballroom was silent. Even the piano had stopped playing. Then he laughed. It was a terrible sound, like wind howling through a ruined building. "Very well," he said. "You cling to your contract, your rules, your precious mortality." He picked up the glass and drank the dark liquid himself in one swallow. When he lowered the glass, his teeth were stained black. "But the night is not over yet, and this house has ways of testing even the most determined souls." He walked away, back into the crowd of ghosts. The piano started playing again. The celebration resumed, but now the atmosphere had changed. The ghosts were no longer ignoring me. They were watching me constantly, their dead eyes following my every movement. I checked the clock. 1:34 a.m., an hour and 26 minutes to go. I could survive this. I had to survive this. More guests approached for drinks. I served them, keeping my hands steady through sheer willpower. But then around 1:50 a.m., something worse happened. I felt something touch my leg. I looked down instinctively, forgetting Rule 2, forgetting everything, and saw a hand emerging from the pool of spilled alcohol on the floor. A pale, waterlogged hand with blue-tinged fingernails. As I watched in horror, more hands emerged. Dozens of them. Hundreds of them, pushing up through the liquid like it was a doorway to somewhere else. They grasped at the air, clutching and reaching. Then faces began to surface. Drowned faces with open mouths and empty eyes, pressing up against the surface of the liquid as if trying to break through. I stumbled backward, nearly falling. My shoe caught on something and I looked down again. The puddles. The spilled drinks. Rule 3 said not to clean them, not to touch them, to leave them until morning. Now I understood why. The spilled alcohol was a doorway, a portal, and something on the other side was trying to get through. The hands reached higher, grasping at the bar, at my legs, at anything they could touch. Their skin was cold and slimy. Their fingers were too long, the bones visible through translucent flesh. I grabbed bottles from the bar and backed toward the wall, trying to get away from the grasping hands. But the puddles had spread everywhere. There was nowhere to stand that was not covered in that terrible liquid. One of the hands caught my ankle. The grip was impossibly strong, cold seeping through my sock and into my skin like frostbite. I screamed and kicked, trying to break free. The hand pulled harder, trying to drag me down into the liquid. "Help!" I shouted to the guests. "Please help me." But they just watched, their faces expressionless. The piano kept playing. The celebration continued. I grabbed the edge of the bar and pulled with all my strength. The hand slipped off my ankle, leaving behind a burning cold sensation that radiated up my leg. I scrambled onto the bar itself, climbing on top of it to get away from the floor. Bottles crashed around me. Glasses shattered, but I did not care. I just needed to get away from those hands. From my perch on top of the bar, I could see the full horror of what was happening below. The entire floor of the ballroom was now churning with hands and faces, hundreds of them all trying to break through. The puddles had merged into one vast pool that covered everything. And the ghosts just kept dancing, their feet, or whatever they had instead of feet, moving across the surface without breaking it, as if they existed in a different dimension. Beauregard appeared at the edge of the bar, looking up at me. "Having trouble, Clifford?" he asked mockingly. "What is this?" I demanded. "This was not part of the agreement." "This is what happens when the spilled drinks are left uncleaned," he said calmly. "They accumulate. They open doorways. The spirits below sense the offering and try to cross over. It happens every week." He smiled. "Most bartenders panic and try to clean up the spills. Breaking Rule 3, and once a rule is broken," he snapped his fingers, "the contract is void. The protection is gone, and the house claims another soul." "I did not break the rule," I shouted. I stayed on the bar. "I did not touch the spills." "True," Beauregard admitted. "You are clever, resourceful. You interpret the rules carefully. Very well. Let us see how long you can stay up there." He walked away. The celebration continued around me while I crouched on top of the bar, surrounded by broken glass and spilled liquor, with a churning mass of grasping hands reaching up from below. I checked the clock. 2:03 a.m., 57 minutes left. Less than an hour. I could do this. I could survive less than an hour. But the hands kept reaching, and the faces in the liquid were getting clearer, more defined. I could see their expressions now: desperation, hunger, rage. They wanted out. They wanted life. They wanted me. Around 2:20 a.m., one of the female ghosts floated up to the bar. She hovered there, her feet not quite touching the churning liquid below. "You must be very uncomfortable," she said sweetly. "I am fine," I lied. "Would you like me to help you down?" I could make the hands go away. Just for a moment. Long enough for you to stand properly. "No thank you," I said. "Are you certain? You look so tired, so frightened." "It would be such a simple thing. Just take my hand and I will help you." She extended her gloved hand toward me. I looked at her hand, then at her face. Her eyes were kind, sympathetic. She looked like someone who genuinely wanted to help. But I remembered the woman who had faded away after breaking a glass. I remembered Beauregard's warning about the house claiming souls. "I appreciate your offer," I said. "But I will stay here." Her kind expression vanished, replaced by fury. "Stubborn fool," she hissed. "You think you can resist? You think you are stronger than this house? Every bartender breaks eventually, every single one." She flew away in a swirl of fabric and cold air. I stayed on the bar, my muscles cramping from crouching in the same position for so long. Below me, the hands continued their relentless grasping. At 2:35 a.m., the young soldier I had spoken to earlier approached. He floated up to eye level with me, his scarred face sad. "You should drink," he said quietly. "It would be easier, less painful. The transition is hard if you resist." "Transition to what?" I asked. "To becoming one of us. This house always gets what it wants. Always. Either through breaking the rules or through breaking the spirit. You will join us eventually. Why prolong the suffering?" "Because I am not dead," I said firmly. "I am alive, and I intend to stay that way." He shook his head slowly. "That is what I thought too. On the night of the fire. I thought I would survive. I thought I was strong enough. But the smoke, the flames, the heat." His voice trailed off. "I burned alive, Clifford. Do you know what that feels like? To feel your skin blacken and crack? To feel your lungs fill with fire? I am sorry that happened to you," I said. But it did not happen to me, and it will not happen to me. I have 45 minutes left. Then I leave. Then I collect my payment. Then I go home. Home, he repeated wistfully. I remember home. I remember my mother waiting for me. I was supposed to return to her after the wedding. She must have waited so long. A tear ran down his scarred cheek. Do you think she is still waiting? I do not know, I said softly. He floated away without another word. The clock ticked forward. 2:41 a.m., 2:48 a.m., 2:53 a.m. The hands below became more frantic. The faces in the liquid screamed silently. The ghosts circled the bar like sharks watching, waiting for me to make a mistake. At 2:56 a.m., Beauregard returned. 4 minutes, he said. 4 minutes until you are free to go. Unless, of course, something happens in those 4 minutes. Nothing will happen, I said. I have followed every rule. Have you? He tilted his head. Let us review. Rule 1, never refuse a drink request. You have obeyed, though your cocktails are terrible. Rule 2, do not look at the guest's feet. You broke that one early in the evening, but we chose to overlook it. Rule 3, do not clean spilled drinks. You have obeyed, though you cheated by climbing onto the bar. Rule 4, keep serving until 3 a.m., but you are not serving right now, are you? You are cowering on top of the bar, refusing to make drinks. My blood ran cold. He was right. I had stopped serving. I had not made a drink in over 30 minutes. The last guest was at 1:50, Beauregard continued. Since then, you have served no one. That is a violation of Rule 4, is it not? No one has requested a drink, I said desperately. No one has approached the bar because you are on top of it, he countered. If you were at your proper station, they would order. But you abandoned your post. You broke the rule. That is not fair. The hands, the things in the floor, I could not stand there. The rules do not account for fair, Beauregard said coldly. They account for obedience, and you have failed. He raised his hand. The contract is void. The room went silent. The piano stopped. The ghost stopped moving. Everything froze. Then the clock began to chime. 1, 2, 3. It was 3 a.m. The spell, or whatever supernatural force had bound everything together, shattered like glass. The ghosts screamed in unison, a horrible chorus of anguish and rage. They began to fade, becoming more and more transparent with each passing second. Beauregard stared at the clock in disbelief. No, he whispered. No, it is too early. It should not be 3 a.m. yet. We had more time. But he was wrong. The clock clearly showed 3 a.m., and as I watched, the last chime faded away. The hands in the liquid suddenly released their grip and sank back down, disappearing into the alcohol. The faces screamed silently as they were pulled back through the doorway, back to wherever they came from. The ghosts faded completely, their forms becoming like smoke, like memory, like nothing at all. Within 30 seconds, the ballroom was empty, silent. The candles in the chandelier flickered and went out. The only light came from the pre-dawn glow beginning to seep through the windows. I was alone. I climbed down from the bar on shaking legs. The floor was still covered in spilled alcohol, but it was just liquid now. Nothing moved beneath it. No hands, no faces, just puddles reflecting the faint morning light. I walked through the ballroom toward the exit, my footsteps echoing in the silence. The mansion felt different now, more decayed, more abandoned. The magic or illusion or whatever had maintained its grandeur was gone. As I reached the entrance hall, I saw something on a table near the door. An envelope. I picked it up. It was thick, heavy. I opened it. Inside were $3,100 bills. $3,000. My payment. But as I looked closer in the growing light, I realized something was wrong. The bills were old, very old. They were Confederate bills printed during the Civil War, completely worthless. I stared at them in disbelief. All of this, the terror, the horror, the impossible night, for worthless Confederate money? No, this could not be right. This could not be how it ended. I ran back through the mansion, searching for Beauregard, for any of the ghosts, for someone who could explain this. But every room I entered was empty, decayed, abandoned. I ran upstairs. I checked every door, every hallway, every corner of that cursed house. Nothing, no one. Just dust and rot and the lingering smell of smoke from a fire that burned over a century ago. I stumbled out of the mansion into the cold pre-dawn air, still clutching the worthless Confederate bills. Behind me, the house looked even worse in the growing light. Entire sections of the roof had collapsed. Windows were shattered. The columns holding up the veranda were cracked and crumbling. How had I not seen this last night? How had the house looked so intact? I did not have time to process it. I just needed to get away. I needed to leave this place and never come back. I ran to my car, threw myself into the driver's seat and started the engine. The sound was jarring in the silence of the bayou, but it was the most beautiful sound I had ever heard. The sound of escape, the sound of life. I drove away from that mansion as fast as the dirt roads would allow, not caring about the ruts or the branches scratching my car. I just drove, following the GPS coordinates in reverse, praying that my phone would work once I got back into cell range. The sun was rising as I reached the main highway. Normal traffic started appearing. Delivery trucks, early commuters, normal people living normal lives who had no idea what existed in the depths of the bayou. I drove straight back to New Orleans, my hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles were white. I kept checking my rearview mirror, half expecting to see Beauregard or the ghosts following me. But there was nothing, just the empty road behind me. I reached my apartment at 7:30 a.m. The eviction notice was still on my door, mocking me. I had risked everything, suffered through an impossible night of horror, and I had nothing to show for it except worthless Confederate money and trauma that would probably never heal. I went inside, locked every door, closed every window, and collapsed on my bed fully clothed. I did not sleep. How could I sleep? Every time I closed my eyes, I saw those hands reaching up from the floor, those hollow eyes staring at me, that dark liquid being poured into the glass. Around noon, I finally got up and looked at the Confederate bills again, hoping somehow I had been wrong. But no, they were real Confederate currency printed in 1863, worth nothing except as historical curiosities. $3,000 in 1863. Money was probably worth about $50 today as a collectible. Not enough to pay rent, not even enough to buy groceries for a week. I had gambled everything and lost. That should have been the end of the story. I should have moved on, found another job, dealt with my debt somehow. But I could not stop thinking about that night. About the ghosts. About the house. About Beauregard's words, "This happens every week." Every week. They held that celebration every week, which meant they needed a bartender every week, which meant the ad would be posted again. I opened my laptop and went to Craigslist. I searched for bartending gigs, and there it was. Posted 3 hours ago. Private event bartender needed, one night only, Saturday, October 21st, 7 p.m. to 3 a.m., $3,000 cash. Payment upon completion. No experience with craft cocktails. Required, must follow instructions exactly. Serious inquiries only. The exact same ad. Word for word. Posted just 1 week after the previous one. I stared at it, my stomach churning. Some other desperate person would see that ad. Some other bartender drowning in debt would think it was their salvation. They would call the number. They would accept the terms. They would drive out to that mansion, and they would go through the same nightmare I had experienced. Or worse, because unlike me, they might break a rule. They might look down at the wrong time. They might try to clean up a spill. They might refuse a drink request. And then they would become trapped. Another ghost at the eternal celebration. Another soul claimed by that cursed house. I needed to warn people. I needed to tell my story. But who would believe me? If I told the police that ghosts were holding parties in an abandoned mansion, they would think I was insane. If I told my friends, they would think I was on drugs or having a mental breakdown. So I am telling you, all of you watching this video right now, that ad is real. It appears on Craigslist every week, usually on a Tuesday or Wednesday. Always for the following Saturday night. The phone number changes, but the wording is always the same. $3,000 for 8 hours of work. If you see that ad, do not call. Do not apply. Do not think you are clever enough to handle it. Do not convince yourself that the money is worth it. It is not. I still have nightmares every night. I cannot work as a bartender anymore. The sight of spilled drinks makes me panic. I cannot listen to piano music. I cannot go near old mansions. I cannot even look at vintage clothing without feeling cold dread wash over me. I kept the Confederate bills as proof, as evidence. I also kept something else I found in my car the next day. One of the yellowed papers with the rules written in elegant cursive. It had somehow ended up in my jacket pocket. I look at those rules sometimes and wonder what would have happened if I had broken them. Would I have become a ghost like them? Would I have spent eternity trapped in that mansion, reliving the same night over and over? Or would I have been dragged down into that liquid darkness where the hands came from, wherever those poor souls were trapped, trying desperately to claw their way back to existence? I do not know, and I do not want to find out. 3 weeks after my experience, I went back. I know that was stupid, but I needed to see the place in full daylight. Needed to confirm it was real and not some hallucination. I found the location using my GPS history. The dirt roads were exactly where I remembered them. And at the end, past the overgrown trees and Spanish moss, I found the mansion. Or what was left of it. It was a burned ruin. The entire structure had collapsed in on itself, leaving only the stone foundation and a few charred support beams reaching toward the sky like skeletal fingers. The gardens were overgrown with decades of wild vegetation. There was no driveway, no vintage cars, no signs that anyone had been there in over a century. I walked through the ruins, and in what must have been the ballroom, I found remnants of old bottles. The glass was melted and blackened from fire, but I could still make out the shapes. Crystal glasses, wine bottles, bar equipment. And in the corner, half buried in ash and debris, I found a brass plaque. I brushed off the dirt and read the inscription: Ashmore Estate, built 1855, destroyed by fire September 9th, 1889, 87 lives lost. May their souls find eternal rest. 87 people died in that fire. 87 souls trapped in an endless celebration, unable to move on, unable to rest, forced to relive their final night over and over again, desperately trying to recapture the joy in life they lost. And every week they needed a bartender, a living person to serve them, to acknowledge them, to help them pretend just for one night that they were still alive. The house was destroyed, but somehow the celebration continued. Maybe it existed in a different dimension, overlapping with our world just enough to lure in desperate bartenders. Maybe the ghosts had so much power, so much collective will, that they could rebuild their mansion every Saturday night from memory alone. I do not pretend to understand the supernatural mechanics of what I experienced. I just know it was real. Before I left the ruins, I noticed something else. A small stone marker near where the entrance would have been. It was newer, placed there maybe 20 or 30 years ago by someone who cared about preserving history. The marker listed the names of those who died in the fire. I read through them slowly. Beauregard Ashmore, age 63, owner. Catherine Ashmore, age 22, daughter. Lieutenant James Morrison, age 19, groom. On and on, 87 names. Entire families. Young and old, rich and poor. All united in death, all trapped together. At the bottom of the marker was a line of text: Every soul deserves rest. May this memorial help them find peace. But they had not found peace. They were still there, still celebrating, still searching for something they could never have again. I left the ruins and never went back. That was 3 months ago. Since then, I have been working security at a shopping mall. Night shift, no customer interaction, no bartending. I am slowly paying off my debts. I am still getting evicted from my old apartment, but I found a cheaper place in a worse neighborhood. I am surviving. Barely, but I'm alive. And if you take nothing else away from this story, remember this. There are some jobs that are not worth taking, no matter how desperate you are. Some money that is too expensive even when it is free. Some doors that should never be opened. Some houses that should never be entered. Some celebrations that should never be joined. If you see that ad on Craigslist, and you will because it never stops appearing, scroll past it. Do not call. Do not inquire. Do not convince yourself you will be the one who handles it better than everyone else. Just walk away. Find another way. Borrow money from family. Pawn your possessions. Take out a predatory loan. Do anything except answer that ad. Because the ghosts of Ashmore Estate are still waiting, still celebrating, still searching for bartenders who will serve them for one more night. And I promise you, the Confederate money they pay is not worth becoming one of them. Thank you for listening to my story. If you found this helpful or terrifying or just wanted to know what happened, please hit that like button and subscribe. Share this with anyone who might be tempted by easy money. Leave a comment and let me know. Have you ever seen an ad like this? Have you ever taken a job that turned out to be something else entirely? Stay safe out there. And remember, some celebrations are better left in the past where they belong. My name is Clifford Morrison, and I survived the Ashmore Estate. But I will never be the same.